Back in 2017, when the Skoda Kodiaq launched in Australia, Tom Baker declared it as the best 7-seat SUV you could buy for $42,990. Now, 5 years later, we've got the slightly updated version, and does that still ring true? The cheapest you can get a Skoda Kodiaq for now in 132 TSI style, guys, is $52,990. This car I have behind me is the Sportline variant. Now, Skoda says that in Australia, there's a pretty even split between all of the grades here. So you've got about 30% to the style, 30% to this Sportline, and then the bulk of the range actually is the RS, which is now fitted with a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine from the Volkswagen Golf GTI. But we're not going to be talking about that car so much today. We're going to be discussing this Sportline. It's a slightly athletic take on the base model Skoda Kodiaq, fitted with a 132 kilowatt 2-litre turbocharged engine with a 7-speed dual clutch gearbox and all-wheel drive. Now, it's a competitor, so Skoda says, for vehicles such as the Mazda CX-8 and also the Hyundai Santa Fe and Kia Sorento. However, you know us at Chasing Cars, and you know that we think the Skoda Kodiaq, being under 4.7 meters long, actually competes more with mid-size SUVs. For example, the Mitsubishi Outlander, which has just come onto the market as of the end of last year and is selling rather strongly here in Australia, seems to be really competitive because it offers a similar kind of practicality to the Skoda Kodiaq. That is 7 seats in a package that is pretty compact and is one that you can fit into your garage at home. So that's one of the reasons we have always really liked the Skoda Kodiaq here at Chasing Cars. But with a little price bump and some spec tweaks, but with some interesting spec misses due to semiconductor shortages as well, we're going to be taking a close look at this mid-spec Sportline 132 TSI in today's video to see if the Kodiaq is still one of the best mid-size/large SUVs you can buy in Australia. Now, of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Kodiaq in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, we'd love it if you could hit subscribe, and at any point, if you've seen enough of me talking about the Skoda Kodiaq, I've left a link in that comment section where you can jump onto the Chasing Cars website and take the next step with us, including organising a test drive, downloading a brochure, and heading over to the configurator. So let's talk a little bit about how the facelifted Kodiaq has changed in the looks department, because they're all very minor styling tweaks, much like the recently updated Toyota RAV4, which is around the same price in range-topping trim as a Kodiaq in bottom-level trim. Yeah, there's not that many differences to talk about. The grille has been subtly changed, mainly in the lower grade style, and this Sportline can be told apart by the fact that it has a black grille, and you get a whole lot of extra black stuff going on this car in general. We've also got new or very similar LED headlights, but they do have sequential indicators which look really slick. Little touch of Audi class here in the Skoda range in a practical and fairly affordable pragmatic vehicle. Moving down the side, we can also tell this Sportline apart. This little badge here, 20-inch Vega alloy wheels on this model, black mirror caps, part of that black pack up the front. And then this car is finished in this lovely grey paintwork, which I'm a big fan of, but of course, let me know what you reckon in the comment section down below. Coming around the back, there's even more Sportline back here. So you've got this black boot spoiler and a lot of black badging, including the spaced out Skoda lettering that we're really coming around to like here at Chasing Cars. Looks nice and classy. Again, like the front end, a little bit of Audi in that. You've also got sequential indicators back here, which look super classy. Now, the way you can tell this car apart from the range-topping 70 grand plus RS is because it doesn't have a little red boot strip, and obviously it's got different wheels and that sort of stuff. So yeah, train spotters, now you know how to tell your Kodiaqs apart. So let's open the standard power tailgate. Now, this car has both packages you can get for this vehicle, so the tech pack and the luxury pack, which bring a kick to open tailgate, which, as I was saying to the cameraman before, is one of the very few cars that I've ever found this to be useful on. Seems to work really nicely. Very handy when you've got full hands of shopping. Now, under that boot lid, it just keeps getting better because we've got 765 litres of total storage space back here when we're in 5-seat mode, as you can see here, which is absolutely capacious. You've also got Skoda's signature practical touches absolutely everywhere. We'll talk a little bit more about those in the front cabin. You've got a space saver spare tyre under the boot, and of course, Kodiaq's party trick is that you've got these 2 jump seats at the back, which we will get to in a minute, but they are just about big enough to fit an adult in. But importantly, when you've got the 3rd row up, you've actually still got a really usable boot. You've got 270 litres of space, which is bigger than a Toyota Corolla hatchback has, and you've still got 7 seats, which is great for fitting kids' school bags or kit bags from cricket or anything like that in the back. And yeah, just means this Kodiaq is a seriously usable vehicle. A couple of other touches include remote fold down seats back here, 12-volt socket, and it is all just really nicely finished. So, inside the Skoda Kodiaq, and yeah, it's actually a really nice place to be. This Sportline grade has got a couple of things that I'm maybe not such a fan of. It's quite dark in here, there's a lot of black, but on the whole, everything feels really quality to the touch, and I think there will definitely be people who appreciate this kind of design language and like this kind of sporty aesthetic in their SUV. Now that starts with a bunch of options basically that this car has had ticked. So the base price of this car is $56,990 drive away, but then this car that you're seeing me sit in is $68,160 drive away, which is actually really close in price to the range-topping RS with its much more powerful engine, which is $74,990. But of course you do get a fair bit of opulence in this car. So things like these heated and ventilated leather seats with electric adjustment for both driver and passenger, which are lovely in their design. They've got this cool tombstone kind of look to them. They're super comfortable, and of course ventilation on a hot day like today here in Australia is an absolute must-have for a vehicle that wants to be considered, you know, somewhat luxurious. You've also got this very nice steering wheel. It's just the right size, a little thick, like right on the border of being too thick, but because it's not squishy like a BMW wheel, you still get really nice crisp feeling back through the steering rack. Ahead of me, I've got the classic Skoda digital dials that you can show a full map on, and they're really interactive. They don't look quite as grown up as the examples that you see in something like an Audi Q5 or something like that, but the fact that the Skoda is much more affordable means that that's absolutely fine with me. Now in the center, we have a 9.2-inch Columbus touchscreen. Again, the graphics are starting to look a little bit old, but for this update, we do have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto inclusion for all Skoda Kodiaqs, which is great to see. You also got a wireless charging pad that is standard across the range. Now, one thing on the wireless charging pad and specifications in general, now I know the facelifted Kodiaq was delayed quite a long time here in Australia, and there are some issues with stock, so contact your dealer if you've got one on order or you're looking to order one to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting, because Skoda have been giving discounts to people who are happy to skip the queue and skip out on some of the technology. So yeah, definitely investigate that. It's a very strange world we live in for car buying at the moment. But yeah, anyway, back to the stuff in here. Navigation, which as I said, interfaces really nicely with the digital gauges. You've got a very simple to use climate control setup down here. It's all physical, all manual, you know, rotational dials, which look very much like they're from a Volkswagen Tiguan, probably because they're from the same parts bin. But you also have the ability to adjust functions through the touchscreen by pressing the menu button here. So you can have a little bit more control through there if you'd like, especially if you've got a passenger in the car. That's really great. Now we get on to the practicalities, which Skoda is absolutely famous for. Cute things like umbrellas in the doors, little bins here in the flock-lined door cards, which are just so nice. It's just lovely to have this little touch, little baggie in there so you can drop your apple cores or whatever. Under this really nice to touch adjustable armrest as well, we've got a very clever bit of storage. Rubberized bottoms here, so the idea is that you can have an open bottle in there and it won't rattle around. Really clever spot to store your key. A little bit of odds and ends behind that, which has a rubberized floor so stuff doesn't slide around too much. I already mentioned the wireless charging pad as well. You got your dual glove box as well. That brings me to the carbon fiber in this car though, which I don't think is hugely tasteful. What is tasteful is this 12-speaker Canton stereo. It's not a name that you normally see associated with luxury brands like a Harman Kardon or Bose or anything, but it's actually really good and gives you a lot of control of the equalizer settings through the touchscreen. And I think that really reflects the kind of person who's very interested in a Skoda, someone who will take the time to set up their stereo to make it sound really great. Really sets off this car very nicely, though it is part of the optional packs. That's part of the technology package or the luxury package, which this car has both of, and I should add, it does have the panoramic sunroof as well. Now coming back to the slightly bland black interior in here, you can get the base model style fitted with a luxury pack that gets leather, and then you can option white leather or like a cream leather color, which is a lovely choice and is going to keep a car a little bit cooler in Australia. This car comes standard with Suedia, but as I've already covered, we've got a $1,900 option pack that gets you these leather appointed and ventilated seats. So on the whole, the Kodiaq is still a very practical, very well built and quite handsome car inside that just works for a lot of people, I reckon. The greatness of the Kodiaq continues back here. It is so spacious. You guys know I'm about 6'2" tall, and I've got bags of knee room oodles of tow room and a really decent amount of headroom, considering I've got a panoramic sunroof. And this bench, I should say backrest, can even recline more, so I can be more comfortable back here. And yeah, it just feels great. You've got the same leather in the front seats. In this particular specification, the lower grades do get suede cloth as standard. This Sportline gets these tombstone seats too, which don't have the integrated tablet holder that the base model Style gets. So it's not as family friendly as that car, but you know, it's still super spacious back here. Map pockets, the 3-zone climate control is part of an options pack, but you do have heated outboard seats in this vehicle, which is just so great to see in a car that doesn't cost all that much money with that sort of stuff thrown in, at least in my book, but you can let me know if this is good value you reckon down below. One thing that does hurt a little bit is the scratchy door tops in the back here. They're really nice and soft and squidgy in the front, and you do have a soft pad here, but just up on top, something we reckon that could have been addressed in the update. But you do have cool things. Integrated sunblind, so you don't have to buy cheap looking, annoying, rattly stick-on ones. Really great stuff. 12-volt socket as well. And then this middle seat is so generous. In fact, the whole Kodiaq package is pretty generous in terms of space. You can really fit 3 across here, as you'd expect from a large SUV, but if you're cross-shopping this with something like a Toyota RAV4 or a Mazda CX-8, as well as the bigger vehicles, then it really does strike that cool Goldilocks balance. And then finally, we've got this really nice, comfortable leather armrest with 3 little cup holders. It's really good back here. I've even got a great view out. Now, as I mentioned in the boot, the back seat, or the third row, is pretty tight in the Kodiaq, but it is here, and that's something that not everything in the midsize SUV class can offer. Now, if you want real, usable, human adult-sized 7 seats, then you can go for something like a Hyundai Palisade, or perhaps something like a Kia Sorento, which offers more space. But if these seats are kind of exclusively for transporting kids, then the Kodiaq is a really good idea. Now, you can slide these seats on the rails, but the one in front of me is all the way forward, and as you can see, I'm jammed up against it. So it's not great for me at 6'2", but as I said, for kids only, it's a really nice extra touch. The ADR combined fuel consumption figure for the Skoda Kodiaq 132 TSI is 8.2 litres per 100 kilometres. Now today we actually pretty much managed to match that. We even beat it by getting 8.1 litres per 100 Ks on our drive through the city of Sydney down here to the Southern Highlands just outside of Bowral. And I reckon that's pretty decent. That is until you take into consideration that the more powerful 180 kilowatt Skoda Kodiaq RS actually gets a better fuel consumption figure than this car, at 7.5 litres per 100 Ks on the ADR combined cycle. So that tells me that the right sizing of an engine might actually mean that it gets more efficient. But anyway, we'll talk more about that in the review of the faster version of this car. Now, what about servicing? Skoda offers now 5- and 7-year service packages for the Skoda Kodiaq, with intervals of 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. For 5 years, you're going to be paying $1,800 in maintenance, and for 7, it's $2,700. Now, those figures aren't as affordable as something like a Toyota RAV4, which is capped to $1,150 over 5 years of servicing. But as far as things go in this more premium, turbocharged segment, especially against Hyundais and stuff, the Skoda Kodiaq is actually really competitive. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $969 to comprehensively insure their Skoda Kodiaq. Now, your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So we've covered off all the practicalities of this Skoda Kodiaq, and as you can see, in theory, this is a great family car, but thankfully it also has a fantastic driving experience to back up all that practicality. Now, you've seen Tom's reviews on this channel before, likely of the RS grades, but I don't think we've done a proper detailed review of this 132 TSI Sportline, which according to Skoda accounts for a decent sort of third of sales here in Australia. So it's pretty important, and this 132 TSI engine is also available on the base Style, which accounts for another 30%. So 60% of Australian buyers, roughly thereabouts, are looking at this 132 TSI powertrain. So how is it? Is it any good? Is there enough grunt to pull you and your family around in this thing? Well, that's sort of the only issue I have with this car, really, is although it's got 2 litres of capacity and decent outputs of 132 kilowatts and 320 newton meters of torque, when it's pushing around a car that weighs 1,750 kilograms, according to Skoda, that's a little bit slow. It gets there and gets the job done when it's empty or has just 2 people on it, but speaking to Ponch, I know he's tested one with 4 or 5 people in there. I know it can struggle a little bit on open roads, but that's really when you're out here, because around town this engine is lovely. It's a peach. It sounds really nice. It's got a little bit of a fruity burble to it. Classic 4-cylinder Volkswagen unit, smooth, slick, and especially when combined with this 7-speed wet type clutch DSG, this car works really well. And I know there's the usual detractors of DSG who say, oh, it doesn't work around the city. But the truth is, the only time it's ever slightly unnerving is if you're on a hill and you're going into reverse. And sometimes you just got to wait for that extra half second until the clutch engages and off you go. Because out here on the road, it changes so sharply. And I really enjoy using these gearboxes as a point of difference to the usual 8-speed automatics you see in vehicles like this. Just gives it that extra feeling of sportiness, which is what this Sportline is supposed to have. So let's talk a little bit about the chassis of this vehicle, because Skoda really knows how to do ride in Australia. Now, we haven't tested a car today not on adaptive suspension, so that's something hopefully we got a chance to do in the future, but all the cars today have had the technology pack, which scores adaptive dampers. So apart from the adaptive dampers fitted to this particular car, as far as I'm aware, the suspension setup is actually the same as the Style. This car just gets slightly larger 20-inch Vega alloy wheels that we already covered outside, and it just adds a little bit of extra firmness, a little bit of extra sharpness to the way the Sportline goes around corners. That's nice. It's got 235/45 Pirelli tyres on it as well, Pirelli Scorpions, which do have enough sidewall so that these 20-inch alloy wheels never feel too harsh. And in comfort, I actually find this Kodiaq to be a little too soft, a little too lackluster in the rebound damping. Normal is about right for me, especially on country roads like this, so arguably comfort, if we're around town, is going to be the choice. And then I find Sport to be honestly a little too firm. It feels a little bit too tightly wound, like it's tuned for smooth, lovely European roads, not the coarse chip stuff we have here. But this thing is a joy to drive. It's got really nice, crisp responses from the steering, and it does shrink around you through a good set of bends, as you really have come to expect from MQB-based Volkswagen/Skoda platformed vehicles. You saw in our midsize SUV mega test perhaps that the Volkswagen Tiguan was absolutely the driver's choice of all those cars on test, a long way above the RAV4 in terms of response and consistency to the driver's inputs. And the Kodiaq is similar. It is a little heavier and a little bigger, so it's not quite as sporty in this grade, but hopefully when we drive the RS, that'll have solved some of those issues with its bespoke tuning. Now let's talk a little bit about NVH, because it has been a little bit of an issue with the Kodiaq. For me, it's pretty decent. Some of the coarse chip roads that we're driving on now do drum up a little bit of noise, but they drum up a bit of noise in any car you're testing, really. So yeah, it's decent. You do get a little bit of thwump around town from those 20-inch alloy wheels, but on the whole, it's a pretty refined experience. And finally, we come to safety. Now, again, you need to option the packs to get the full safety features that you've sort of come to expect from a lot of mid-size SUVs, the stuff that's going to protect your family from getting into an incident. So things like rear cross traffic alert, blind spot monitoring are optional and bundled into the luxury package. So you have to spend the extra money to get that. But according to Skoda, that's something that pretty much every Kodiaq buyer is going to do anyway. Apparently there's a very high take rate on the luxury package that bundles all the safety features. So what do we think of the Skoda Kodiaq's driving experience? Is it still the best? I think so. It's got this real smooth, polished feeling to it. It doesn't feel like a Volkswagen entirely either. It has a little bit more of a light-footed feel to the way it goes about driving down a country road. It doesn't feel quite so solid on the road, and I actually really like that from a Skoda. So I think, yeah, it's a facelift, but not that much has changed with the Kodiaq, and it's still one of our favorite 7-seat SUVs you can buy. So what do we think of the lightly updated Skoda Kodiaq? Well, it's still a lovely car to drive. This car's optional adaptive dampers mean that it's even better. It's got a real duality of character to it. You can bang it down a twisty road, and you can also cruise in comfort around town. I do wish it had a slightly more powerful engine as standard, but I guess that's what the 180 kilowatt RS is all about, which we will be testing very shortly. Now, you can let me know your thoughts on the Skoda Kodiaq below, whether you think that this upper mid-size 7-seat SUV is a good buy, or if it has been a good buy and a good car to live with for you if you've already bought one. While you're down there leaving a comment, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.